Okay, so welcome everybody. Great to see you on this live call again. Today we're talking on the topic of king lies, and in a second, I'm going to see you on this live call. Let me just mute there. That's much better. Okay, so yeah, welcome, and I'm going to hand over to Dave now, and we're going to start off by Dave giving us a bit of an overview on king lies. So welcome, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I gave it the name king lies because the psychological term is your depressive hypothesis. And depressive hypothesis didn't work for me, and it didn't work for my students. King lies, on the other hand, can be otherwise known as primary mistaken beliefs or misbeliefs. Basically, they are undergirding conclusions that are wrong, and they usually come to in childhood or teenage years. And the result is that they skew your perception of life. They skew your perception of how to cope. They skew your coping strategies, and you end up with survival kits rather than life skills. Survival kits are not to be confused with life skills. Survival kits are quick fixes, and there are literally dozens of them. But at the heart of every survival kit, there is a king lie. And you've got to work out what your survival kits are and why they're in place and why you're allowing them to rob you of success and the abundant life. But underneath those survival kits is usually a childhood conclusion, which seemed innocuous and innocent at the time, but now is poisoning your entire paradigm, your whole outlook, and eventually it'll poison your character. So if we can find those king lies, and you can think of an upside down pyramid where the top of the pyramid is upside down, and it starts with that wrong conclusion in childhood, and then it eventually manifests in a broken life, broken moods, broken attitudes, broken feelings and emotions. But of course, nobody only believes lies, do they? Everyone has a mixture of truth and lies. And as a result of that, they can become double-minded. So they have foundational truth operating in their mind, but they also have foundational lies, and never the two shall mix. This leads to instability. This leads to volatile moods and affective disorders. This leads to mood swings and instability of thinking and of attitude. And sometimes we say a person has like two personalities. They have a B side and an A side. This is often due to the fact that deep, deep down, there is a king lie in conflict with a king truth. Now, that king lie could be something easily recognizable, like life sucks, or like there's something wrong with me, or like I'm inadequate, or like nobody loves me. Or it could be a little bit more profound. It could be my survival is all up to me, or trust nobody, or success should be easy. And each one of those king lies has its own fallout and its own queer path behind it. You can tell a person by their wake, the wake they leave behind them. You can tell a mood by the effect of it, and you can tell a king lie by the way the person lives. If I want permanent change in my client's life, and I do, it's not enough just to go for superficial false thinking or positive thinking or try harder, legalism or behaviorism. I have got to get to that king lie. I have got to trace it with empowering questions. I've got to face it with confrontation and a crisis moment. And then I've got to replace it with truth coaches and with new behavior and with new life skills. If I can get rid of that king lie, I have got permanent, radical change. And Living Wisdom is all about radical, permanent change.
Thanks, Dave. Dave, I think last time we were talking, you spoke about king lies being like the doorkeeper in our lives. I wonder if you could just talk about that a little bit more.
Well, when we listen to something, say advice or a lecture or read a book, we're always judging it by what we already know to be true. And we will accept what we agree with, and we will reject what conflicts with our basic beliefs. And here's the problem. If you've got a king lie that you're loyal to, then any teaching you hear or any books you read or any lectures you are given that contradict that king lie, which at this point you're still loyal to, then the latter teaching must be rejected. The idea is that the earlier beliefs are the truest. And so we go through life loyal to an early belief for no other reason than it was there first. And so if I'm inadequate, don't tell me I'm adequate. If my survival is all up to me, don't tell me I need to trust you, submit to you, or obey you. If I believe success should come easily, I will keep trying to avoid the bottom rung and go for quick fix, get rich quick schemes, and keep trying to pretend I'm wealthier than I actually am, with disastrous consequences. So what we've got to do is get down to that thing and flush it out. Now, Derek Prince said, God will only deliver us from our enemies, not our friends. And in Living Wisdom, what we have to do is convince you that this king lie is, in fact, your enemy. Otherwise, it will be the gatekeeper and it will be the permission giver, and it will not allow you to hear counseling, advice, direction, religion, faith that contradicts what you already believe. When someone concludes that evolution is the entire truth, they become extremely resistant to any concept of divine creation or biblical creation, or concepts that don't involve evolution. And it's the same with morality, it's the same with politics, it's the same with theology.
So our earliest beliefs, our earliest truths or lies that we take on board are the most profound or believed in our lives. Can a later belief that we've replaced, can it kind of go down to that same depth and have that same sense of authority in our lives?
Yes, providing it's injected properly. Otherwise, it can just become positive thinking. And when I say injected properly, I mean delivered by somebody who's skilled in getting the right truth coaches to the right place in your thinking. This can require psychotherapy. It can require recitation and memorization work. Some clients have said to me, your truth coaches don't work. I've got the list here, but I've still fallen over in temptation, or I've gone back to old ways, or I've allowed old moods to overwhelm me. Your truth coaches don't work, David. And I've said, okay, well, just to be sure that you've actually got them there, without even thinking about it, can you please rhyme off 4 truth coaches to me from memory, straight up right now? They can't. They never can. And I'm saying to them, actually, you don't know whether truth coaches work or not because you haven't yet tried them. You need to have those truth coaches there to antidote king lies and avalanche of desire straight away. Otherwise, the king lies, which are much more experienced than the truth coaches at getting your attention, will just simply take over and you will regress to form. You'll go straight back to what is habitual. You'll go straight back to your default mood. And so truth coaches have to be there to give your brain another way of processing the situation. Otherwise, the king lies will simply take over yet again. You cannot replace 20 years worth of king lies with 5 minutes worth of meditating on truth coaches. There has to be a meditation on the new concept, the new percept. There has to be an appropriation of the new perception, so that the king lies start to give way and break up. They are dissolved by truth, and truth sets you free from the power of old lies.
Dave, I remember you saying a few years back, to get a truth from the head to the heart, say it loud, say it strong. Is that kind of approach, you still back that as an idea?
You know, I haven't been doing that much lately, and I've been remiss because it's actually a very powerful way of learning. Say it loud, say it strong. If God be for me, who the hell can be against me? If God be for me, why am I so frightened? If perfect love casts out fear, why am I still indulging fear? Don't I believe I'm loved? My Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I do have the mind of Christ. Why do I still believe this lie? And as you say it loud and you say it strong, the shock waves and the vibrations go right through your brain. In other words, your brain begins to wake up and it starts to get it. Yes, I believe in declaring all of the truth. And as you declare the truth, not just positive thinking, but the truth that can antidote the poison, as you declare the truth, then your whole brain gets it.
So this is really about blowing out the old neural pathways and laying new tracks down.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Dave, just before we move on to the specific questions we've got today, is there any difference between a king lie and just a maybe a normal lie that we might be hanging on to?
Oh, yeah, sure. The problem is, you see, that they move around a bit. What is a minor lie for one person can be a king lie for another. A lie that is built into the paradigm of one person may not be a foundation stone like it is for another. Two children in a family may be loyal to the same lie, but for one person it's not a big deal. For the other, it's the philosophy by which they run their whole life. And so for one, it is a king lie. For another, it's simply part of the self-talk. And so I've got to establish with each client, whereabouts on your hierarchy of beliefs does this lie sit? Is it a minor lie that is simply part of stinky thinking, or does it actually prop up the entire attitude? Is it propping up the entire wrong attitude? I need to work that out, and we call that the hierarchy of beliefs. Remember what I said? The earliest ones feel to be the rightest, and they're the strongest. And when a child comes home from school, or when a child is a child, they can come to certain conclusions which then get laid down into their paradigm and become an invisible part of that paradigm for the rest of their lives. And that's why people can't get baptized in the Holy Spirit, can't speak in tongues, can't trust, can't vote Labour or Democrats or Republicans or National, can't tithe, can't not tithe. These things dominate their lives, and they end up. A quote comes to mind by Ulrich Williams, New Zealand's greatest doctor, historically speaking. Ulrich said that the carnal man does not hold beliefs. He is instead held by beliefs. And I think that's very true, and I think it's very profound. So I'll say it again. The carnal man thinks he holds beliefs, but in fact, he is held by beliefs. And I've thought about that a lot over the years. I think that's a very true statement and worth considering. Are you holding beliefs, or are the beliefs holding you?
So what role does our spirit play in releasing us from those beliefs that the carnal man's holding?
The role of the spirit is to go searching for truth, searching for insights, searching for truth coaches and scriptures to strengthen itself in order to give itself options. You can't make free choices until you have options. And the options have to be at least as strong or as powerful as the lies. So until you start collecting up truth, you don't actually have options. Your spirit can't make better choices because it doesn't have better options to make the choices from. It's amazing. When you teach a person assertiveness skills, suddenly they don't have to clam up when they're angry, and they don't have to blow up. They've now got a third option. They can be assertive. They can say what they need briefly, succinctly, respectfully. They've now got a third option. They can speak the truth in love. Their spirit has found a third option, and it's given it another choice. No more blowing up, no more clamming up, just negotiate, just say what I need. And so as the spirit seeks more truth, it then opens up more options and gives it more power. So it's no longer a slave to the only option it's actually got access to.
Okay, so here we go. One problem I have had, especially in the past, is that I trust people too readily. Where does this king lie originate?
Yeah, it's a good question. We call it naivety, and naivety or gullibility or even credulous. Credulous is not a common word, but credulous means too easy to believe, too quick to believe, and too gullible. And the credulous person often has very good parents. They never saw deception or broken promises role modeled in their childhood. And so they grow into the world thinking that the world is like their family. The world is like mum and dad. People are straight up and honest like their own family. And so it's a big shock to them to realize that there are wolves out there, there are foxes out there, there are people out there who will rip you off or take you for granted or hurt you whatever chance they get. So they go into a world of crazy makers as innocent babes, and they really get hurt. They trust too easily. Either that, or they've never learned to test or check. They say you should accept people as they are, and they don't test them, they don't check them, they don't do due diligence. And as a result, they end up in relationships and in deals, agreements. They end up yoking up with somebody they don't really know. And again, I would have to say, such people end up thinking that trust is dangerous, and they often end up not marrying because trust is too dangerous, or they end up in a power struggle with their spouse because trust is too dangerous. And that can be a king lie. Trusting is just too dangerous. And my truth coach for that is, it isn't trust that's dangerous, it's dumb trust that's dangerous. So you have to learn that people are trustworthy when they've been tested. And indeed, Paul said that to Timothy, do not ordain a man into ministry until he's been tested. We don't do dumb trust when it comes to ordination. And it never ceases to amaze me that people who are smart in every other area of their life will trust others in a very naive fashion, and they will get hurt. I would say some of the most pain-filled people I meet are people who got ripped up, ripped off, sucked in and spat out because they never took the life skill of trusting seriously. They didn't do due diligence, and they assumed that everyone was just like their parents.
Thank you, Dave. Is it a common thing to have 1, 2, or even 3 king lies, or is there typically one you have found that truly trumps as king?
Yes, the king of all kings in the king lies, I would have to say, goes like this. Are you ready? Drum roll, please. I am not enough. That one spawns dozens of lies, hundreds of lies. I am not enough. I have to overcompensate. I have to try harder. I have to hate myself, or I have to love myself so much I become arrogant. That one spawns hundreds of lies and misconceptions and dozens of bad attitudes. I am not enough means that you don't learn to love yourself or value yourself or take good care of yourself, or you're always striving too hard to please. And you can become a hater or a pleaser on the basis of I am not enough. You can become vain or you can become inadequate on the basis of that one. There are others, but that really is the big one, followed by my survival is all entirely up to me. I am all alone, and if I'm going to survive, it's got to be all up to me. That will make you a crazy maker or a narcissistic. That will give you a borderline personality disorder if you take it to extremes. So those are the two most toxic ones. Having said that, any king lie can destroy your life.
Dave, in the Christian world, sometimes loving yourself is frowned upon because, well, you know, we're supposed, well, even though it does say love others as yourself, but there's still this tendency to see that as a little bit suspicious, a little bit new age. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the Bible says, to the defiled, all things are defiled. And if you see self-love as narcissism, and that's the only way you see it, then anything that says you need to love yourself has overtones of narcissism, selfishness, pride, and arrogance. But the Bible also says, no man abandons his flesh, but takes good care of it. And so the point being that Jesus assumes that we are going to love ourselves, but we need to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. The problem is today we've got a lot of people who are against themselves, and they're not actually taking good care of themselves. So neither a rescuer nor narcissistic B is probably summing up that issue. Neither a rescuer, because you can lose yourself as you serve others, nor a narcissist, because you lose others as you love yourself. And a big part of counseling and mental health is getting that balance right. Good self-care. Speaking of good self-care, I've just had a haircut, spent some money on myself and tidied myself up just for you guys. I hope you're impressed. But that was self-love. It was caring for myself. But hey, I'm also doing it so that I can be a bit more presentable for my students. And we've got a class running here in Nelson at the moment. And I was getting the odd mention that things were getting a bit scruffy. So it was time to look after my image as a teacher so that they would not be offended and their learning inhibited. So it all works together. Love of self, love of others must serve each other.
Cool. Okay, would you please talk about codependency in relation to king lies?
You become codependent when you fail to individuate. When you don't get on your own 2 feet, you become codependent. You end up in reaction to other people and not proactive. A proactive person has individuated, and their attitude is, I'm sorry if I have to disappoint you, but actually I do have to disappoint you on occasion. I do have to say no, or I do have to negotiate your needs with my needs. And if you're upset by that, that really is not my problem. Whereas the codependent will say, if I offend you, you'll withdraw your love from me. I cannot live without your love. I am dependent on you, and I will panic if you threaten to reject me or abandon me or hate me or dislike me. That's not an option for me. And so I must do whatever it takes to retain your friendship and loyalty. So codependency really is a failure to get on your own 2 feet. And codependency means that your security is up to somebody else. Your self-worth is up to somebody else. You're really leaving your worth in somebody else's hands. This can make you very vulnerable and very frightened and very prone to panic if they threaten to pull the rug out from under you. It's not surprising that codependency and drug addiction go together. It's not surprising that violence and codependency go together. It's not surprising that poor mental health and codependency go together. The child's task is to achieve independence. And when they become an adult, the task is to become interdependent. But what happens is that children who go straight from dependency into a relationship don't achieve independence. And so instead of establishing interdependence between 2 peers, adults of equal status, negotiating, they end up back in a parent-child relationship with their lover or spouse or boyfriend, and that it doesn't bode well for the future. That codependency means that somebody's very vulnerable to being dominated, and somebody is being encouraged to become bossy and controlling.
So it almost comes back to that big king lie of I'm not enough.
That's the one.
Okay. How do you shake a client's belief that their feelings would never lie to them? How do I convince myself of that in the moment?
In Living Wisdom, we try and bring people to a moment of crisis as quickly as possible. This crisis point is essential for radical, rapid change to take place. Let me say that again. This crisis moment is essential for change to be radical and rapid. And what we often have to do in that crisis point is shake a person's trust, confidence, and belief in their feelings. And I've got a bone to pick with all those therapists who deify somebody's feelings and put them beyond critique or correction, because the more you validate a person's feelings, the more loyal they become to those feelings and the more off course they can go. So it's quite possible to come out of a therapist session sicker than when you went in, because your original problem stemmed from the fact that you were far too loyal to your feelings. And you just spent an hour with a counselor who's not a counselor, they're a colluder. Now, I acknowledge feelings, make no mistake about that, and some feelings that are not acknowledged need to be acknowledged. But for every person who needs to acknowledge their feelings, there's 5 people who need to tell their feelings to sit down and shut up, because their feelings have been ruling, dominating, controlling, and bossing them around ever since they were little children who were not corrected and who never had to side with mummy or daddy against their bad mood or their own feelings. And as a result, they are slaves to their passions. Slave to your passion is not a good place to be. It can lead to bipolar disorder. It can lead to rage. It can lead to depression, and it can lead to hyperanxiety. And so much of the time I have to say to people, yes, your feelings are real, all right, but this emotional instability that you are suffering from is not type 1 bipolar, it's type 2 bipolar, and you're actually in desperate need of curbing your feelings and talking back to your feelings and not being so jolly loyal to your feelings. And so I teach my clients, especially my Christian clients, to side with the truth against their own feelings until their feelings lose their grip, they lose their power, and they are weaned off their feelings. There are many adults who need to be weaned off their feelings. Listen, feelings are only as reliable as old conclusions. King lies produce wrong feelings. Stink thinking produces stink feelings. The problem is that you can't just say to a person, shape up, sort it out, snap out of it. It does not work, because you cannot actually just change your mood. The only way you can get to your mood is to change the self-talk and the beliefs that are setting that mood up. And so when you need to change those feelings, instead of getting a prescription, instead of getting a pill, instead of getting a joint, instead of having some comfort food, try giving up the lies and telling yourself the truth. The problem is that you can't tell yourself the truth if you don't know what it is. And that's where you're going to need a guide. That's where you're going to need a coach. That's when you're going to need some truth coaches to dwell on. Only when you have stable truth coaches to dwell on can you expect your moods to become stable. And trying to fix it with a bottle of pills, well, I've got bad news for you. The pill hasn't yet been invented that can teach you how to think. And if you have mood-changing pills, you just become dependent on the medication. Don't do that. Don't go there. Truth will set you free if you can find the right ones.
Okay, this question is quite complex. I've been thinking on the lying twin brother kings in my life. That is the numbers 1 and 2 on the list, which is about my survival is all up to me, trust no one, versus trust everybody. I am beginning to think that King Lai 1 is the strong and powerful brother, while King Lai 2 is the sickly, weaker brother. Is it possible that this weaker brother is no King Lai at all, but a later manifestation? It definitely feels like an unconvinced belief that I'm supposed to trust others when actually I don't. However, the patterns of my behavior demonstrate unwise trust all along my life's journey. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, I see two things there. I see a king lie and I see a prince lie. And so the king lie can operate and dominate your life, but every now and again the prince lie comes in and does its thing, and you can swing from far too skeptical and cynical about life to just going all out to believe in your Messiah, your Prince Charming, your gorgeous pedestal girl. And so you can actually swing hard from left to right. You may be generally cynical, and every now and again you just kick over the traces and do something really naive. We're all capable of doing that. You can live naively and then become deeply cynical in one area only of your life. So financially, you may be naive, but sexually, you may be cynical, or vice versa. So it's quite possible that you can swing between both. And ultimately, what we've got here is somebody who doesn't understand that trust is the queen of the life skills. You must understand trust. And so we don't trust without testing. We do due diligence in every area, but we don't become cynical or skeptical. When I'm doing pre-marriage counseling, I'm checking this couple on their trust skills level, for example. It's an essential part of pre-marriage counseling. And I want to know, are they both got this thing sorted? And often one of them turns out to be quite cynical and the other turns out to be quite naive. Sometimes they take it in turns and swap over. But what we need to do is teach them to do due diligence and teach them that it's a problem if you don't trust somebody who has earned your trust. That is a serious problem. When a man isn't trusted, even though he's earned it, he takes it very personally and he feels very insulted whenever his wife challenges or undermines or interrogates him on his decision. On the other hand, you can go too far the other way and trust even when it hasn't been earned, and you're going to get in trouble too. So we're talking here about developing a life skill to compensate for two king lies: trust everybody and trust nobody.
Okay.
Good question. Brilliant answer, but the question was good too.
Yeah, I like the haircut too, Dave. It's very nice.
Oh, full of confidence.
So this one's about trust as well. It's listening to Trust Nobody, Survival's Up to Me. I'm reminded of a young man whose mother had a very traumatic upbringing in a dangerous part of South Africa, where it was very difficult to trust anyone. Her son has been brought up in New Zealand, but has all the outworkings of this king lie discussed. My question relates to this relationship. Can the very fearful, anxious mother indirectly pass her lack of trust and anxiety to her child, even though the child has been brought up in a very safe and loving family?
Oh yes, this is very common, where the children inherit the unbearable feeling of the parent. Hey, if mum was scared of it, I better be scared of it. If dad was freaked out by it, I better be freaked out by it. Many people who came through the Depression became hoarders or very mean and tight in their financial dealings, and their children fear bankruptcy to this day. So that was then, this is now, has got to be practiced and applied. This feeling is way out of date, has got to be practiced and applied. Or this was mum's experience, it isn't mine. I do not need to collect brown paper bags. I do not need to collect newspapers. I do not need to hold on to anything that might be useful one day. Or you become a hoarder based on your parents' experience of lack and deprivation. So it's quite important to look at this and say, you know what, I inherited this feeling from my parents. This feeling is telling me lies. I need to update my thinking here, and I need to reassure myself that I can compensate for this feeling. This was mum's inheritance, this was dad's inheritance, but it's out of date now, and I have to step around this feeling because it's actually just an echo from a previous generation.
Okay. David, can you expand more on the self-fulfilling prophecy? I don't understand this. Someone once told me that if I worried about getting breast cancer like my grandmother did, I would create a self-fulfilling prophecy. How does this work?
That's too simple. I don't agree with that. You don't automatically bring about what you fear. But what can happen is, for example, the more you fear rejection and abandonment, the more you cling. And the tighter you cling, the more claustrophobic your friend and the more likely they are to dump you. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's bringing about the very thing you fear. The tighter you get financially, the meaner you get financially, the more minimist you come thinking financially, the smaller your income. And as scripture says, he that withholdeth tendeth to poverty. So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or anxiety. The more afraid you are, the more you see the dangers around you, and the more phobic you become. Another self-fulfilling prophecy. So the engine of the self-fulfilling prophecy is emotion-based reasoning. I feel it, therefore it must be true. Chicken Little telling everybody the sky was falling was doing emotion-based reasoning. And eventually Chicken Little hid inside to avoid the sky falling. And eventually the world collapsed in on Chicken Little. So that's the way that we bring about the thing we fear. But simply to say, I'm worried about breast cancer, therefore I'll get it. No, that's not correct. But I'll tell you what is correct. The more anxiety and stress you have, the more adrenaline your brain squirts into your body. And adrenaline and constant load is poisonous. Constant secretion of adrenaline can bring fatigue overload, but it can also start poisoning your inner organs. Nobody knows where it's going to strike, but one thing's for sure, if you're secreting toxic substances in your blood, you can invoke an autoimmune disease. And much autoimmune disease, such as lupus, etc., can result from a brain that is not at peace. And as we know, a merry heart does good like a medicine. And as you refuse to do emotion-based reasoning, the peace of mind means that your brain doesn't become the enemy of your body. Autoimmune means that your immunity system is now corroding and eating your own body, but it's often set off by a stressed brain. A stressed brain is a huge liability to a body. It can result in skin disease, digestive disorders, alimentary canal disorders. It can result in a whole host of autoimmune issues. Any condition ending with itis is inflammation, and most inflammation, a lot of inflammation is caused by a stressed mind. So that's where the self-fulfilling prophecy starts, and you end up with a psychosomatic illness, or you end up with an accident due to a preoccupation. Anything that can cause fixation can cause accident, and anything that can cause stress can cause sickness and disease.
So I guess a merry heart doeth good like a medicine is an example of a positive self-fulfilling prophecy.
Indeed, yes, indeed. And so here's the thing. If your brain is unhappy or stressed, every cell in your body knows it. And it puts pressure on every cell in your body. The mitochondria of your cell knows it. Every essential part, and it's because it's connected up. It's connected up through the endocrine system. It's connected up through the blood. It's connected up through at least two nervous systems, not to mention other systems I don't know anything about. So when your mind is stressed, your whole body is under load.
Okay, Dave, this is a question about a king lie related to verbosity, too many words. I can understand why I may use the survival kit in times when I'm feeling unsafe, but I wonder, why do I use this in safe situations? Is this because the King Lie has led to a survival kit which has become so ingrained that it has become a part of my character? Would time frames for healing be longer with this type of survival kit?
Well, here you've got where all three concepts are in play. The big three, I call them, they're all having a go here. You've got your default mood, which is verbosity, if you like, the survival kit of having too much to say and not having a dialogue, rather getting into a monologue every time you speak, rather like what I'm doing now. And the other one is the unbearable feeling, which is to be misunderstood, misjudged. And I remember I had a student who was too verbose. And when they were asking a question, they'd go round and round and round the point. They would never make their point. And students were rolling their eyes. When I finally cut in on them, I asked an empowering question: when did you learn that it's dangerous to make your point? And the poor chap, as he thought about that empowering question, dissolved into tears as he regressed back to a time in childhood where he made his point to his dad, and his dad gave him a thrashing for it. And so ever since that lesson, he learned to be circumspect in his speaking. And his wife was fed up. She was rolling her eyes. Whenever he would talk, she would just switch off. She was over it. But I realized that this is a survival kit that I'm witnessing. It's got a King Lie operating there. It's dangerous to make your point. It's got a default mood there, and there's a fusion there as well. And so all three are conjoined. Now what I've got to do is get in there and sometimes take them back to the original experience, sometimes not. But either way, I've got to deal with this unbearable feeling of being misunderstood or misjudged. They have welded feeling misjudged to rejection or abandonment or humiliation. And their brain is going, subconscious is going the whole time, make sure they don't misunderstand you. Make sure you don't offend them. It's dangerous to offend them. Make quite certain that you don't rub them up the wrong way. And therefore, this survival kit intrudes on their communication, and there is verbosity, there is roundabout, there is waffle. It's just hard to have a conversation with those people. They get on a trail and they don't seem to be aware of the other person in the conversation, rather like what I'm doing now.
So there's a real fear dynamic that's sitting behind that survival kit.
Well, often there is. And that unbearable feeling is saying, hang on, don't come here, get away from here, put some more explanations and bring some more detail, make sure you don't tell a lie, and make sure that you don't misrepresent the situation, more detail required, and on it goes.
Okay, Dave, what sort of questions can you ask to tease out the King Lie in a client? I know you've been working on that one for a while, so.
When did you first experience this feeling? What was going on for you at that time? What conclusions did you come to as a child when you went through that trauma? What did you learn at your sexual awakening that you need to unlearn? What did you learn when the kids teased you that you need to reconsider? What did you learn when you entered into that contract and got ripped off that you now need to unlearn? What was the lesson in that for you? Stuff like that is quite helpful. Why do you think that success comes before work? Doesn't that occur only in the dictionary? Why do you think that success should come easily? What set you up to believe that comfort eating is the way to comfort yourself? When did you confuse food with love? When did you confuse money with power or progress? And so if you know what you're looking for, it's reasonably easy to find it. If you have no idea what you're looking for, you'll probably never find it. you'll probably just trip over it, like I did as a novice counsellor.
Thank you, Dave. So we've got some follow-up questions now from the previous sessions. So this is about realistic expectations. When are expectations troublesome? What to do if being ridiculed for wanting to do things, if you're being ridiculed for wanting to do things well?
Now, some people walk about with their head down and their shoulders stooped, because when they walked tall and proud and were proud of their ability or celebrated their intelligence, they got chopped back, chopped down, put down by jealous children, jealous brothers and sisters. And so they've learned, don't stick your head up. Because why? Because shining means rejection. And so they do cut themselves back. They do knock themselves down. They're afraid of their own ability, or else they've learned, if they're particularly intelligent, that that will cost them popularity. And it's not unusual to see gifted, bright children give up on their giftedness because it's costing them friends, or it's costing them the vital peer acceptance. So some people try to be small in a world of small people in order to gain acceptance. And I can pick those people pretty easily now. They're highly intelligent, or they're very gifted, but they're sitting on it, they're squishing it, they're squashing it because it's going to cost them social acceptance. And I always try and take those kids aside and say, you know what, God made you tall, you need to walk tall. Do not hunch your shoulders and try and pretend you're short for short people. And in a sense, everybody is a genius. Everybody is gifted somewhere in their lives. And I like to see children discover that giftedness as soon as possible, and then begin to promenade, begin to show, begin to shine. Strut your stuff, kiddo. You've got what it takes. And I'm not trying to knock them down or make them humble. I'm trying to say, develop it, train it, build it, and don't apologize to anybody. Your gift will make room for you. You don't need to get arrogant about it, because other people are good at stuff you'll never, ever be good at. Just be proud of what God has given you and concentrate on developing it. It could be physics, it could be horticulture, it could be pets. You know, there are many different forms of intelligence, and I try really hard to show a child where they are intelligent. There's not just one kind of intelligence. There's numerical intelligence, there's color intelligence, spatial intelligence, mechanical intelligence, animal husbandry intelligence, horticultural intelligence. There are hundreds of different forms of intelligence, and I think any education system that grades people into some artificial version of intelligence can cripple their academic intellectual confidence, and that's an evil thing to do to a student of any age. So encourage them to develop their gifting and not to apologize for anybody.
Dave, can you speak a little more about the process of individuation when this ideally occurs? Some examples.
Should be going on in early teenage years. It should be as the child grows confidence to think for themselves, hold their own opinion, come to their own conclusions, and reason it for themselves, rather than simply believe it because somebody says it. They're allowed to think for themselves, and they're allowed to learn assertiveness skills. When a teenager is not allowed to learn assertiveness skills, they are abandoned to anger or sulking. They're abandoned to a temper or to sabotage. They don't develop their assertiveness skills, and so they don't know how to disappoint or say no with respect. You need to be able to say no and disappoint people respectfully to individuate. If you're freaked out by the idea of saying no to your father or disappointing your mother, then you haven't yet individuated. You're guessing their reaction, you're scared of their reaction, and you become a pleaser or you become passive aggressive and devious. Devious is what you do if you don't individuate, or aggressive is what you do if you don't individuate. And so I would just say it's getting on your own 2 feet, it's becoming your own person, it's achieving independence the right way. Now, when I'm doing pre-marriage counseling, I ask the people, how did you leave home? Because how you left home can reveal to me whether or not their individuation was successful. You leave home with a bad attitude, rebellious, resentful and angry, that's not individuation. You detach defensively, that's not individuation. When you individuate, you become peers and friends with your parents. You become their equals as you go into your 20s, and you suggest to each other, you negotiate with each other, neither of you try to dominate the other. That's individuation.
And if your parents aren't too keen on that approach?
Well, guess what? I'm a big boy, a big girl now, happy to negotiate with you, but not happy to simply comply because that's what you want. It doesn't work like that between adults, unless, of course, you're employing me.
Yeah. Okay, so connecting the notion of limbic lag, we've kind of talked about this, but limbic lag and king lies.
Well, we'll talk about limbic lag first. Limbic lag is basically, I'm making the change, but it still doesn't feel right. I'm making the change, but it doesn't feel natural. I'm doing as you've instructed me, but it doesn't yet come automatically. And this is a big one for addicts. Addicts must be coached through limbic lag, or they will fall off the wagon, they will backslide, they'll always go back to what feels normal. And it's a bit like driving a left-hand drive car for the first time, or driving on the other side of the road. It takes a while for it to feel normal. Meanwhile, you've got to be getting through limbic lag. So I take limbic lag very seriously. Any counseling for radical change must take limbic lag seriously, whether you're giving up cigarettes or whether you're going running or jogging, or whatever it is not going to feel natural or normal for maybe a week, 2 weeks, even a month, until you've been doing it consistently. And then suddenly the feelings of normality are there. No one knows how they came, but it's got to do with the limbic system being overcome by the neocortex system. If you're a golfer and you go for some golfing instruction, they'll change your swing to something much less automatic and much less comfortable. And then you have to practice that swing until it comes naturally. But many golfers don't follow through with that. And many people swerve back to the other side of the road in an emergency and somebody's going to die. So that's really limbic lag. As far as how does it work with a king lie, well, the king lie is that my feelings are always reliable, should always be submitted to, and would never tell me lies. And so to get you through limbic lag, I've got to convince you that your feelings are not that reliable, and you need to side with the truth until the feelings figure it out and they come around. So the main king lie is that my feelings would never lie to me. And the main king lie is that feelings should only ever be celebrated, never confronted or told to sit down and be quiet.
Dave, how do you actually go about rebuilding shattered trust?
First of all, understand that you contributed to it. You were naive, you were credulous, you were not trained in discernment. So when you realize that, you've got to reparent yourself, and you've got to train yourself in discernment. You have to train yourself in doing due diligence. Many people don't even know what due diligence means. So they were not trained in it. They were put out into the world as lambs among wolves. So here's the thing, once bitten, twice shy. But the problem is that delinquent understandings, adolescent understandings, I should say, of trust, you end up categorizing people. So all car salesmen are untrustworthy, all firemen and doctors are trustworthy, all vicars and lawyers are untrustworthy, and you put these people in these trustworthy versus untrustworthy camps. It's very juvenile thinking. In fact, the bottom line is that everybody is trustworthy somewhere in their lives, but nobody is trustworthy everywhere in their lives. I've been trying to earn the Lord's trust now for 40, 50 years. I still wouldn't say I'm there yet, but I'm a lot more trustworthy than I was as a teenager. However, if somebody puts a packet of chocolate peanuts in front of me, I can't guarantee it'll still be there when they get back. So we are still learning to trust ourselves and each other, and we are still learning what it takes to do due diligence. And I would have to say that this is the queen of the life skills and one of the harder ones to get round.
Okay, Dave, I'm going to hand back to you in a couple of seconds for the final word this week. But I just want to commend everyone on the great work that is going on into the Mindset School. It's been really encouraging to see people grappling with the journaling process, and some people bringing together both journaling and the question why to try and really dig down to what's going on in their subconscious mind. And it's also been great to see people thinking about their radical change goal, because as we move towards the end of the 10 weeks, that's going to become more and more of our focus, using journaling and the question why and the information that you're receiving through the teaching and these live coaching calls to really get on top of that radical change goal. So it's been great to see people jumping in and giving that a go, and I want to encourage those who haven't to give it a go, and just really celebrate those who have. It's wonderful to see. Next week, this week coming, tomorrow, we'll be putting out the information about the unbearable feeling. So that's our topic for this week, and looking forward to digging into that. And Dave, I'm going to hand it back to you for the last word.
Yeah, thanks, mate. When it comes to the unbearable feeling and the assignments you're doing, perhaps we better call your homework home play, because we don't want to invoke an unbearable feeling. So enjoy your home play. I've been watching the work you've been doing online, and it's been great to see. Marvelous to see you wrestling with the issues and really getting to grips with them. I would counsel you not to start asking for advice. That's not what this is for. Giving each other advice on the topic is one thing. Giving each other advice on your lives is quite another. So stick to the topic, stick to the subject matter, and continue to process that and discuss that. It's great to see it, and I see you processing it at quite a profound level. So do continue to do that. It's marvelous to watch. And remember that the only dumb question is the one you didn't ask because you were embarrassed. No questions here are out of bounds, in the sense that if you're wondering it, other people probably are too. And Darren, I commend you on your answers. It's great to see the way you're coaching them and how much they appreciate that is obvious. Keep up the good work, my friend.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.